Muito obrigado. Antes de mais, também voltar a agradecer a vossa presença aqui, em nome também da Associação Portuguesa das Famílias Numerosas. É para nós poder apresentar-vos este trabalho. Irei fazer a minha apresentação em inglês, para também benefício dos nossos convidados. No entanto, só fazer uma ressalva, de facto. Não, temos aqui pessoas que são investigadores sérios, são reconhecidos internacionalmente nas suas áreas. O nosso trabalho não é exatamente aquilo que podemos chamar um estudo científico. O nosso trabalho é um estudo de análise de dados que nos permitem perceber um pouco o que é que tem sido, no fundo, esta evolução em Portugal e que nos dão pistas para depois, em colaboração com estes investigadores e com outros com quem temos trabalhado em Portugal, podemos aprofundar estas questões. Então, passaria agora para inglês. So, our presentation will focus not exactly in either of the titles we had here. It's not exactly a presentation of the demographic trends in Portugal and in Europe. We'll look at that, but that will not be the focus. We will like to focus in policies. What are the family policies here in Europe? And for that we will look at current situation. Unfortunately, we all know that it's not that good. Afterwards, we will look at the impact. We all know that, but I think it's interesting because some of our guests will go into greater detail afterwards on that, and just would like to highlight some of the data. And finally, looking at the causes. There are different types of causes, but we know that policies have an impact. And we know that different types of policies have been impacting demography here in Portugal and in Europe. So, starting by assessing the current situation. We all know the situation in Europe. We know that countries like Portugal have the lowest ever fertility rate we have assisted. It's not even in wartime. In many countries we had so low fertility rates. The redder the country, the lowest the fertility rate. Some of the countries have been either escaping, either actively countering this trend, like France and some of the northern countries. This is something that is happening for some decades now. And here what we have is the redder the country, the more fertility has declined during the past 30 years. And you know that we know that Portuguese countries, Eastern countries, and some, with notable exception of some Scandinavian countries, we all have been decreasing our fertility. And in fact, we can look at this fertility reduction in two different aspects. Okay, it's this one. Here we present to you the darker blue. It's the actual fertility. It's the number of childs each woman has in a certain year. Of course, it's not that linear, but it's a good approximation. And we see the data is from 2006. It's the only year for which we can collect data for all these countries. We have data for Portugal, more recent. But in fact, we are very much further from the 2.1 that are needed for the renovation of generations. And in the lighter blue we have the desired fertility, meaning the number of children that women, it's based on women or families would like to have. And we can see that both of them has been decreasing during the past decades. And we can attribute this decrease to two different dynamics. One, a longer one, the cultural change, a structural change in our mindsets, in the way we look at families in Europe. And this is the desire, this has an impact in the desired fertility. It means that people want to have less children. And we'll go into greater detail on that in a few minutes. And then the current situation, the policy environment, defines here the actual fertility. This gap means that families are not confident enough to have the children they would like to have. And this gap is where policies can act. We are not talking about birth policies and forcing everyone to have more children. We just want to give freedom to families to have the children they want to have. So, looking at this cultural change, just an highlight. This was an article that came out in Times magazine 1 year ago. And the title says everything. When having it all means having all children. Children are coming out of the equation of having a fulfilled life. And of course, fortunately, this is not a global trend, but it's something we can observe in specific groups all over Europe and all over the world. So this really highlights the the cultural change that we are looking to. For the contextual change, meaning for this part of change in which families do not have the children they would like to have, we will look into a different plot, and I will ask for your patience for me to explain to you what we have here. Here, in the vertical axis, is the fertility rate in 2012. Okay? In the horizontal axis, we have how has this fertility rate changed over the past 12, 13 years. And so we can highlight here 3 different groups, and this is what we'd like to share with you. This first group, countries that are over there, the fertility rate is not as low as in the other countries, and whatever they have been doing regarding family policies, it has been working, because the fertility rate has been increasing in the past decade or so. We have a different group in a bad situation in terms of fertility, around 1.4, 1.5, but these countries are countries that one way or the other have been doing something to counter this trend. So, and whatever they have been doing, it is working, because some more, some less, but fertility is increasing in those countries. And finally, we have a different group. It's a group of countries, unfortunately, you see that we are there, Portugal are there. We have very low fertility, and whatever we have been doing during the past 12 years did not work. So this provides us just the clues that I was talking about earlier to look at these policies from a results standpoint. I know that Livia Ola will help us to understand this from a more social perspective, more interesting even than this one, but this provides the background that we want to look at. We believe that we can have good family policies in different political matrices, in different ideological matrices. And in fact, we don't have one-fits-all solution in terms of family policies. But so we want to look at it in terms of result. What really works? And so we have looked at what's happening. And now let's look at what is the impact. What is changing with this? First, the European age pyramid. First thing we notice, it's not a pyramid anymore. And this has a strong consequence, is that our social systems, the social welfare state that in most of our countries we so much enjoy, is only possible with an age pyramid. Because we have young people that will go into labor market and that will contribute to social security, supporting free health care, help to the people that are more in need, and so on. So, first, no more of an age pyramid. And we see that what we are missing is this part. We'll go into that. We see that the age profiles of all our countries are changing. Portugal more severely. This is the blue is the 0 to 20 years, the orange the 65 plus age group, and we see that they are changing. We also like to highlight that some countries, like in Spain, it has been changing a lot, but they stopped changing. They start acting, and whatever they are doing, it has worked. Some of our countries, just to see where we are, there are others, but just to highlight some of them. What is the consequence of this? Is that we create what we can call a demography gap, or a demographic gap, or a youngsters gap, or an active population gap. Meaning that, for instance, I'll give you the example of Portugal, is one I know best. Since 1982, we don't have enough birth in Portugal to secure the renewal of generations. It means that from that year on, every year we are missing more people to have that age pyramid and not that coffin, as Fernando told us so many times. And this creates a gap. And what you see here, it's the gap we are creating, meaning that, for instance, in 2012, we were missing 60% more births than we had to secure generation gap. The conclusion can be, quite direct. For instance, in Portugal, since 82, we would have needed 1.4 more births in Portugal to secure the renewal of generations. If you consider that we have a 10 million population, you can see the magnitude of this gap. And of course this has consequences. We know that schools need to close. We know that shoe manufacturers go out of business. Youngsters' clothes manufacturers go out of business. We don't see so many children in the streets anymore. And this is something that unfortunately we can feel on our day-to-day. Other countries like that, Spain once again, countering this trend. And of course, well, unfortunately the crisis is having some impact. This is exactly the same plot you've seen some minutes ago, but just to highlight another consequence. This is a social strain. People want to have children, but they cannot have the children they have. They end their lives and they say, I'd like to have had more children, but I wasn't able. I didn't have the conditions, I didn't feel confident. And this, of course, causes us an enormous strain in terms of personal fulfillment. I know we have people here that can explain this much better than me, but data also shows this trend, and I think it's important for us to include this in the consequences part. Another number just to show the paradox we are having right now, and I will go again into Portugal. This is the plot of childless women in each of these countries. And you can remember that in Portugal had the lowest fertility, or one of the lowest fertilities in Europe. But at the same time, is the country where less women have no children. Means that a large majority of women want to have and they have children. But they have just one, because they don't feel confident enough to have more children. Meaning that people want to have families. And you will see in Portugal, I think Liviola will speak about familiaristic countries. We are one, fortunately, and but well, we want to have children, but we don't feel confident enough. Finally, and reaching the end, understanding the causes. And I will not talk about the causes of that long cycle, the cultural change. We should look into that. I think Luca Volonté will provide some highlights also on that. I think he will also. But looking at that short-term change, we know that policies can be, these groups are not exclusive, of course. They can be universal if they target everyone, and everyone receives the support no matter the income they have, if they are a man, they are a woman, and so on. They are means-tested, meaning that you only receive the support if your income is below a certain threshold. They can be child-related subsidies, or they can be special subsidies. In this point, I'll just highlight the type of analysis that our team is putting forward. Looking for each country, and we also look for the cooperation with GALFAC members to expand this study, and check from birth up to 24 years, what type of support. If they are means-tested, they are universal, one-off subsidies, or special types of subsidies. We can look at this is in terms of money transfers. In Portugal, you can see most of the support is means-tested, meaning that depends on the income, and means that a middle-class family usually doesn't have support to have their children here in Portugal. And we can also talk about leaves, meaning the time that a mother or a father can be without working, having his or her salary to take care and to attend for their children. Well, yeah, this. Now just to present you an interesting result that our team got. If we look at a large family, let's look at that. 5 people, 3 children, a father and a mother. We look at the amount of supports they have since the birth of their first child, and we assume that the other children are born every 3 years. And you see, and this support is calculated as a percentage of the average annual salary of the country. And we can see that we have countries like Portugal or Spain in which the direct support is around 10% of a salary, and you can see there are other countries at the end of 20 years you almost double the average salary, or you get an average salary just to take care of your children. Of course, this does not capture the full extent of the reality, because there are other types of support. We know that Sweden is a case that we look into because of its apparent success, and it has. But much of, and Liviola, I think it can help us to better understand this, but much of the support is not a direct transfer to the parents. It's the provision of an infrastructure that supports children. It's free healthcare, free kindergartens, free schools with a good quality, free access to culture, and so on. So there are different types, but this is just to illustrate the type of work we are looking into. Final remarks, and trying not to extend too much the time I have. Family policies. There is work from Rita Testa that reached some highlights regarding what should be considered a good family policy. We have adapted somehow, but just to highlight that what we look at is from these results, and that the countries that had the most impact in terms of demographic change were the countries that applied family-related policies, and not just policies to increase birth, and not just policies to help the ones that are more in need. These are policies that are needed, but that's social security policy. That's a different thing. Countries that had more success consider policies to help families when the child is born, when they have to go to the doctor, when they have to go to school, if they want to go to a theater, because that's part of the formation of a children, and so on. So they are all-encompassing policies that allow for families to have freedom too. If I want, I will stay at home with my children, but if I prefer, I'll go to work and I will have someone to help me to take care of my children. So good family policies are policies that promote freedom of the parents to choose the education model they want, to have the children they want, when they want, assuming that the child is not a burden. And we'll look into Martin Verding to explain this to us in more detail in a few minutes, because it's not a burden, it's an investment. It's a benefit for the family, for the region, and for the country. And it's the future, because in 50 years, in 60 years, I would like to be there, but probably my children will be there, and our children will be here. So, just to launch, well, this is more of a teaser, but it's something in which we are working, and an area in which we feel we need to cooperate to tackle this. We have the equivalence scales, and they are put forward by the OECD, as you know. And they say that when calculating subsidies for families, there are lots of economies of scale, and that's really easy. And so you just, in terms of expenses, you just count the children as 0.3 of an adult, and that's okay. That is wrong, and that's a fallacy. And what we know, and we who have families know it very well, we don't have economies of scale. We have to thank Anna Seed for coining this term. We have economies of sharing. What happens is that our income does not go as fast as our children are born, as our fertility sometimes. And so what happens is that we have to adapt our consumption profile, and that we target our purchasing power to our children, and we redirect it. So what we have is something that Fernando called many times a voluntary impoverishment. We forsake income and forsake certain types of vacations, certain types of meals in expensive restaurants for our children to be able to have access to education, to culture, to leisure, and so on. So what really happens is not an economy of scale, it's an economy of sharing. We share space, we share rooms in the house, we share a car, we share occupations. Sometimes we cannot do everything we would like to do, we do what the other likes to do at home, and we share clothes, we share toys, and we share everything. And this will be just a teaser. This will be the next part of our study, together with something we'd like to launch with ELFAC, which is a web-based, European-wide observatory on family policies for us to be able to better interact with each other and with our governments. Finally, just to thank my team and the team that works with us. I just go there and say some things about the work they do. They do the real work. It's Francisco Tirlubão and André Almeida Pina. It's our professional team in the studies cabinet. And they, as myself, will be available to answer any questions you might have. So thank you very much.